Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Liberty Portal podcast. Another exciting show for you today because alien disclosure is here. Or is it? We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the Biden bribery scheme that is picking up some steam. We've got a new report from the House Oversight Committee chair on that. Could be some pretty damning stuff in there. Trump has officially been indicted over the documents that he took from the White House during his presidency. And the SEC has officially filed fraud charges against the two largest crypto exchanges in the United States. We're going to get into all of that stuff. If you are just tuning in on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. And wherever else you're listening to this podcast, we appreciate it if you give us a follow and a review. And of course, share this with your friends. To talk about all these interesting things, we've got my main man, David Rand. How are you?
I like the alliteration there. Main man David Rand.
Man David
that was
Rand.
Good, man. He's in the groove today.
I'm killing it. 4 hours of sleep does wonders for you, apparently.
He's also a rapper. He's throwing in the rhymes everywhere for you.
I'm trying not to dox that other life of mine, so if you could just not do that, would be great.
If you had a rapper name, what would it be?
Probably something ginger related, to be honest.
DJ
I mean, it's pretty
Skittles,
trite.
something like that. Yeah. Okay.
DJ Skittles?
Like Eminem play. I don't know.
Lil Ginge.
Lil Ginge. That sounds great. We'll go with that. Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching. Good.
Yo, I'm Kyle. I also go by Captain Quigley on Twitter. I'm here.
And he's excited to talk about the SEC thing because he's our crypto bro, as you all know.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into the top story today, which some have labeled distraction from other things. We've probably talked about it in that context before, but there seems to be a renewed urgency, a renewed legitimacy to the alien disclosure conversation because we have some new reports and sightings and of course this whistleblower coming forward saying the United States has alien spacecraft and bodies of extraterrestrial pilots. David, why don't you start us off on this one? Why do you think that this disclosure is more substantial and more legitimate than perhaps it has been in the past?
Well, okay, so this is one of those epistemological questions, knowledge questions that are so important, right?
That's
how closely
epistemological.
Yeah,
means
the knowledge questions, the philosophy of knowledge. Like, how do you know what you think you know? What do you believe is true versus what do you just intuit?
Sure.
Right. So for a lot of people, they're looking at aliens and they're saying, "I have no material evidence. I've never experienced this," but people say that is. Obviously, direct material evidence is a higher standard than if someone just says, "Hey, I had this experience that was weird and I can't explain." There's another one if you have material evidence and you're looking at it. Well, we do have some interesting material evidence of something we can't explain. We've had that for some time on various different mediums. Back in the day, obviously it was blurry pictures and stuff like that, and skepticism is warranted. The question is right now with some of the evidence that's come out in the last, 10 years? Additionally, some of the evidence that come out very recently on top of the testimony of this, what you're mentioning, this article of a gentleman who has a lot of credentials in the intelligence community using a part of a National Defense Authorization Act subsection that basically said it is not a violation of your duties as an intelligence officer to go directly to a member of Congress and give them disclosed information.
And so that's what he did. He basically said, I have this knowledge of what's going on, and I'm going specifically to a member of Congress to try to bring this to light because it's something he thinks the public should know about. But he didn't just go send it to the New York Times or something, for example.
Right. So this it's not a leak, right? It's using a relatively new, and it's interesting. There's a trend here. There's actually a couple different trends going on with people doing that as a process. Because if you go through the official channels, as this guy testifies, if you try to go through the typical Western, executive branch exclusive channels, there's a tremendous amount of persecution that happens from other people in the intelligence community who might or might not want that out.
Right.
So you have of course, no one would be surprised by the incentive structure. Everyone kind of belongs to the same culture, the same organization. So when, you have information that makes the organization maybe look bad or undermines credibility in that organization, the group is going to rally against you and try to make things hard on you. And that's definitely what we've seen when it comes to spying, right? I mean, Snowden specifically said one of the reasons why he didn't use the typical channels is because if you do, sometimes you end up with problems, right, in your life. The rest of your life is terrible because the agency will make it so.
Yeah.
So whether or not you believe that, ultimately, I mean, you can see the incentive structure. So he brings this to a congressman, has this huge reputation, begins talking about this stuff. At the same time, We have NASA with a 4-hour briefing talking about UAPs, unidentified
Aerial phenomena.
And this new office of, what's it called? AARO, of that is Government Anomaly Research Organization, functionally. And with this, you have some really interesting information that's kind of coming out that they're talking about when they're basically saying, we don't know what this is. We don't have, for a lot of these reports, we have explanations, but not all of them. And the ones that we can't explain are really disturbing, right? Because they are things that don't behave in ways that we can explain. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Their role in this is very interesting too, because one of the things, if you look at their 4-hour briefing, we do have a quick summary, or at least like a section of one of the things they covered. One of the things they say up front is, we are doing this because we want to reduce the stigma of people being able to do these reports, because we can't do this without data. So they suspect that there are thousands of sightings by commercial airline pilots that don't get announced.
Really?
Or reported because they're worried about their career, right? If they say they saw something they can't explain. Now, in some cases, that's going to be explainable if they had more information, but they don't. They're just like, I'm just not going to say anything. Mm-hmm. So anyways, do you want to roll up the clip and we can
Yeah,
kind of get
I just pulled it up for us.
a sense for the material evidence, and it does have some good context for it too.
All right.
Arrow is approaching these cases with the highest level of objectivity and analytic rigor. This includes physical testing and employing modeling and simulation to validate our analyses and the underlying theories, and then peer reviewing those results before reaching any conclusions. This is an example of one that I showed at the hearing recently. This is a spherical orb, metallic, in the Middle East, 2022, by an MQ-9. I will come back to the sensor question that David raised here in a moment. This is a typical example of the thing that we see most of. We see these all over the world, and we see these in making very interesting apparent maneuvers. This one in particular, however, I would point out, demonstrated no enigmatic technical capabilities and was no threat to airborne safety. While we are still looking at it, I don't have any more data other than that. This is a newly released video. You'll notice there are 2 dots moving back and forth. There is a plane at the bottom that's moving across the screen, and now there are 3 dots moving back and forth. The moving back and forth is from the sensor and the platform that's collecting it. This is a P3 on a training mission in the Western United States. They picked these up and they tried to intercept and was unable to intercept them. The reason they couldn't catch them is because after further analysis, it was shown that those objects were actually much farther away from the P3 than they thought. And in fact, when we went even deeper, looked at air traffic control data, we were able to match those to aircraft on a major flight corridor heading into a major airport for landing.
I never thought that someone could make aliens so boring, but he did. Wow.
Yeah. But I mean, it's interesting. You can watch his congressional testimony too, and that is also interesting, right? Because they're like, you got this congressperson sitting there like hearing from these guys the report, and they're like, well, we had this much reports and this much that we were never able to identify. And it's a lot still, right? So you're getting 600 reports and 100 you can't identify. That's still, or really explain.
Yeah.
And what I liked about that clip is it shows both one that no one can explain. Where's the propulsion in that coming from?
Right. I mean, for those just listening, it looks like, something that, it's hard to tell scale, but it's like the size of a volleyball or something, but just floating, like flying static, like through the air.
And 3 of them like parallel in the sky.
The second one was, those 3 lights. The one in the Middle East looked like this just metallic ball, like a beach ball or something like that, just floating through the air. Very, very odd. But and this is the role I'm going to play on this episode is the skeptic, because I want to believe, but I also feel like there's just a lot of coincidences here, timing wise. We've talked about aliens as sort of this distraction from other things that may be more important, etc. Right. I want to believe that aliens are real. I think that they probably are, but I'm also concerned that the government has incentives potentially to be releasing this sort of stuff at a certain time for certain reasons. And I don't know what those are necessarily. But can't this kind of thing be faked? We live in the world of AI and deep fakes and stuff. Couldn't somebody make that up?
I mean, it definitely could be a deep fake, except for the fact that we have the amount of evidence we do over the amount of different, phenomena, right? If you have both like the Tic Tac video and that showing the same thing, we have credible people saying, this is something that I've experienced, I've seen as I was flying the airplane, I saw the thing and I can't explain it. And it wasn't just floating slowly. It was moving so fast we couldn't keep it on camera. Or it was so low to the water, if it had a propulsion system, it would be affecting the water. Why wasn't it? That sort of evidence, you could be like, yeah, it's all a fake. That said, we also have AI algorithms that exist to try to detect fakes, right? And if the government was holding, this technology or trying to develop those technologies out of crashed craft or non-crashed craft, I guess, there would be two incentives, right? Hide it all, do disinformation campaigns in order to distract people, and then, why, which when they're going to go is just kind of up to, we don't have the evidence to be able to suggest which one they're actually doing.
Right.
Right. So in the situation where your knowledge is such that you can neither like confirm and you definitely can't deny it, right? How should you think about it? Well, I don't think what you should do is say, I know they're here, or I believe in. What I suggest most people do is hold it at that arm's length, but keep in mind that if this is true, it would be the biggest story in 1,000 years.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. I mean, that we are not alone question would be answered.
Yeah.
Right. And the sociological impacts of that, what are all those? Like, those are tremendous questions that we don't want to face up to or talk about.
Yeah. I think a part of my skepticism about it is understanding fundamentally, like thinking about it. Okay, I live in a world where we know that extraterrestrial beings are real, are visiting us, have been for who knows how long.
Yeah.
That's a really fundamental paradigm shift for a person or a population to make. And I mean, isn't that sort of the grounds for the government, if they have been, concealing the existence of aliens? Isn't that why they would do it? Because they think it's going to panic the public? This episode is brought to you by our friends at Zesty Beverages. They're on a mission to the standard American diet by crafting drinks with fewer calories and more nutrients from real food. Their lineup of delicious offerings now includes Electric Peak Yerba Mate, postbiotic sodas, keto-friendly, ready-to-drink margaritas, and hard teas. Wondering what a postbiotic soda is? Well, head on over to zestybev.com to learn more and find a retailer near you. Once again, check them out online at zestybev.com. That's zestybev.com. Right?
Well, and one of the things, because like, what would that type of a concealment operation look like? Like a lot of people that would be skeptical of like the government conspiracy concealing all this thing, I think they're often thinking that it's like every single person in the government is in on it, but that's not really the case. It really just requires like a handful of classified agencies withholding information, and it's kind of like and decentralizing the information across these different agencies.
So no one has every bit.
Nobody
of the
has
information.
every single bit. Like, like I've heard from people that have worked on top secret projects before, like the SR-71 back in the day at Area 51, and it's like they just get their small little piece of the puzzle. Like they're an engineer on this part of the project, and they don't realize what they're building in the long run. And then when it's finally declassified decades later, they're like, oh, that's what I was working on, right? So
Wild.
It's kind of like, and it'd be the same thing with the alien stuff. If there are different organizations kind of working on these things, it's probably like some people come in and they get classified information about their little piece of the pie of this larger puzzle, right? And that they don't really understand what they're doing. And that's how you keep all this information concealed, I would think, on like kind of a major level.
Yeah. And the downside of that is the civilians don't get any of the technology. All the benefits don't go to anyone else. But I mean, one of the things I'm skeptical of is if we had capabilities like this, what would the implications be foreign policy wise and domestically? What would we be missing out on? Say you could get a craft that could go into outer space with a fraction of the fuel cost, a fraction of the energy output, could travel between planets much more efficiently and easily. What would that mean for the human race as well, right? I mean, the downside would be tremendous, right? I mean, if we were just not given that.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, the upside for humanity would be absolutely, like, fundamentally changing on a species-wide level, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about all the billions of dollars that Elon is investing in making us an interplanetary species, it would totally evaporate like the whole rocketry industry, right? If there all of a sudden there was this anti-gravity technology that we could just leverage, or like, what are the power implications? What does that mean for utilities and clean energy? And I mean, it could launch humanity into like a whole new era of existence.
Well, it's been years since I've looked into the Bob Lazar case, but and different people have different qualms about the Bob Lazar case, but Bob Lazar was allegedly a guy that was brought in to work on reverse engineering a piece of like a crashed something, in at Area 51. And he was talking about how it's kind of like this gravitational shifting technology that they were working on. And, and it was the same thing of what I was saying before. It's just like he got a small piece of the puzzle and he didn't see the larger outcome of everything. So it's just like he could only speculate on what he was dealing with, right?
Right. And then this intelligence officer like Bob Lazar isn't gaining much from this, right? No. What is he getting? A little bit of fame, kind of, sort of, also a lot of hate from his colleagues, the people that he probably most closely identifies with and culturally has the most incentive to care about their opinion of.
So why would he do it?
Exactly, right? And that's the question, right? If you have a long, storied career in the intelligence services and you can go retire and have an easy life, why wouldn't you? Right? I mean, maybe because something's true, maybe. Or maybe they're just shooting for 15 minutes of fame and maybe infamy is just as good. You got to wonder about that though. Like, why would you burn the bridges of the people whom you are most reliant on for all the things of human motivation, right? When both want to be appreciated, wanting to be, acknowledged for your contributions, and all that's washed away. And now you're just a UFO conspiracy theorist.
Well, and that's exactly why I look at the other side of it, which is, what if this is a mission, a task that he is being given, a role within the intelligence community to say, it is now your job to bring this information to light, be it real or not, and you're carrying out this task on behalf of the government for this specific intelligence purpose.
Yeah. And I would just suggest we don't have any more of that evidence than we do that this is like fake.
We certainly
or real,
don't.
right?
But the incentives align a little bit more clearly to me, right?
Yeah.
Like, why would a guy throw away a storied career to just blow the whistle on aliens when, maybe it'll come out eventually? I mean, is he that attached to this issue, or is he just doing his job?
Yeah.
Could also be like a lot of this information, it is a slow, dulled out release over decades in order to not scare the public, with all the information at once, like you were saying earlier, Joe. Like it could be this thing because now it's almost like everybody is just accepting. It's like, oh yeah, we're being visited by aliens on another planet, and now people are mad because they're like, show us the bodies. Like that's what they want now. And it's before UFOs was kind of the crazy thing, and now we're just like, UFOs make sense,
right? And you got to put it in the larger
slow
context.
dulling people into it,
right? The larger context. Why this is so important is because it's official channel, is because it's someone within the government, is because NASA is hosting this thing, is because that they're admitting all these things that for many decades they have denied any programs of. One of the things he's claiming is that these programs exist, and obviously it's confirmed by more overt actual laws and processes, and like the guy from NASA talking. But there's also the question of, why would he do that? Well, maybe he's doing that because he realizes the total loss of trust in the American public have in their government, and he doesn't like that. It could be because he's patriotic. It could be because he wants us to become a multi-planet species faster too, because the impending nuclear war, right? That maybe he's concerned about. I don't know, right? We just don't know. But I don't think that the calculation for what our standard of belief is should weigh anymore. Just because we're skeptical of government, we shouldn't necessarily weigh that it necessarily is that. And I just see that I'm not necessarily talking about you. I'm talking about on Twitter, right? Well, you'll have something like this come out and there'll just be a bunch of comments just like, it's a distraction. Well, wait a minute. Can we chew gum and walk at the same time? Can we both see that there's major stories to cover and that this is an important major thing that's happened if it's true?
It also, it could be both. Like
right.
It could be, let's bring this information when it's convenient, and it could be true information, right? It doesn't like, it could be a distraction. It could be used to utilize for, spending and getting grants and funding and stuff like that, but it's just like you're calculating and you're being strategic about when you dole out the information. It could be that.
Well, and I think that's a really interesting pivot into that video clip that we have from, I believe it's Jimmy Dore's show.
Well, actually, it comes from our boy Liam McCullum. Jimmy Dore was used his tweet on the show, but I saw it this morning. So yeah, I'll pull that up right here.
This is more like a flashback to some time ago.
Yeah, this is years ago. I mean,
this is years ago.
And to preface it, this is Paul Krugman, you know, a very popular Keynesian economist, columnist for the New York Times, correct? Yep. Who is basically making the case that if we had a depressed economy, we could use alien disclosure to rally spending in the name of defending against an invading force of aliens.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and check the clip out.
Like this is the solution for inflation is basically what it is.
Or a means of creating inflation if there wasn't.
Yeah. All right, here we go.
Maybe Boston's big dig was just fine after all.
Think about World War II, right? That was actually negative social product spending, and yet it brought us out. I mean, partly because you want to put these things together. If we say, look, we could use some inflation, Ken and I are both saying that, which is, of course, anathema to a lot of people in Washington, but is in fact what the basic logic says. It's very hard to get inflation in a depressed economy. But if you had a program of government spending plus an expansionary policy by the Fed, you could get that. So if you think about using all of these things together, you could accomplish, a great deal. I mean, if we discovered that space aliens were planning to attack, and we needed a massive buildup to counter the space alien threat, and really inflation and budget deficits took secondary place to that, this slump would be over in 18 months. And then if we discovered, whoops, we made a mistake. There aren't actually any space aliens.
So we need Orson Welles, what you're saying.
No, there was a Twilight Zone episode like this in which scientists fake an alien threat in order to achieve world peace. Well, this time we don't need it. We need it in order to get some fiscal stimulus.
Yeah. Well, okay. So
a lot of things to talk about.
Yeah.
There.
So I want to talk about the economics there, but let's first talk about the aliens. I don't think that this is being released because they want to get us out of the slump, of course. I don't think that anyone's suggesting that. But it's like that, is it a deception in order to get a response from the public? What response would they want? More paranoia? Maybe.
Oh, well, I think it's much more, it's not, especially with the Krugman argument, it's not necessarily a response from the public. It's a response from the officials who are going to vote on policy to give more spending for military programs and things like that so that we can juice the economy with military spending kind of things, right? I think that's and I think that's where the World War analogy comes from on Krugman's argument here.
Right. So I want to be clear, he's wrong about the Great Depression and World War II as that recovered the economy. That's not true. That's been thoroughly debunked over and over and over again. The Great Depression did not end until after World War II. When you look at wealth and people's ability to save and produce, that's when it ended. If you just look at unemployment, yeah, of course, World War II ended the Great Depression from an unemployment standpoint because we drafted all the unemployed men, right? But we didn't become more wealthy by firebombing Dresden. Right. That's not how it works. We destroyed things. We didn't make more things. So if you make tools of destruction, which are sometimes necessary, they don't increase your productivity or your wealth as a society. Duh. So this is an error that happens when you look at the economy as an equation rather than as a generation machine, an organic generation machine for producing wealth. And wealth in this terms is not defined as the amount of money. It's defined as your ability to access goods and services to solve problems that you have. I'm hungry, so I can get food. Well, even in the midst of World War II, there were food shortages and major problems, and not just caused by government mandates on foods, because of government policy and because we all kinds of things that we did throughout the Great Depression with the NRA, the National Recovery Act. And additionally, it's really okay, so. Would it create a condition in which, if you're in a depressed economy and you started increasing spending and more inflationary more inflation during a recession, does it actually improve the economy? Well, they tried that in the 1970s repeatedly, and it created stagflation. So I'm sorry, that's not how it works.
Doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm just very skeptical of this. I think a more stable monetary policy it does far better when it comes to creating the things that actually create wealth, as opposed to just more economic activity, which is different, right? Because you can create economic activity by saying, dig holes in the ground and then fill them back up. That's labor. That's unemployment.
But that's not producing something of value.
Right.
Yeah, but the Keynesians aren't going to look at it that way, and that's where Krugman's,
it's his
views
entire
lie,
thesis,
right?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's his entire thesis.
That consumption is the basis of the economy. Production is the basis of the economy. It's called Say's law, right? You have to make something before you can consume it.
Right, which makes perfect, basic, rational sense to anyone, whether you know economics, you've taken a course, or you're a Joe Schmo off the street, right?
Right.
You have to make something before you can buy it, obviously.
Well, and going back, shifting into the alien stuff as well, we also had the Las Vegas thing that just came too, where it's like, all these things are coming out at once. It's like apparently in somebody's backyard, like a day or two ago, somewhat recently, there were like these 8-foot tall men that showed up, and then they just like disappeared.
Yes, the chronology I saw was there was a cell phone shot of a green orb of light like crashing.
Actually, body camera footage.
Over. Was it body camera footage
of
the
a
crash?
police officer.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's what it was, yes.
Who then gets called to, and then his partner gets called to the scene to investigate when a 911 call at the same time as the picture from the body camera happens, soon after calls and says, there's someone in my backyard and they're 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
Creature.
And they're looking at me and their eyes are glowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't hear the eyes glowing thing.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, it's part of the call. Yeah, we can watch the video if we want to.
Yeah, I do have the partner coming onto the scene. That's the footage that I have right now. If we want to look at that, it's very short, but just to give people a bit of a
so this is body cam footage from a cop who is responding to this call about the 8-foot.
Yeah, and he's like talking, and he's like warning the people, is like, my partner saw something, But here's the clip right here.
They saw something fall from the sky. They checked their backyard and they saw something with 8 to 9 feet, no clothes, green-colored men, not human, with the eyes were glowing, and it was not a human being. So, yeah. What's up? Yeah, there's multiple people in this home, so we already checked. Huh? More than one. So if you see anything, just give us a call, okay? Hope you have a good night. Take care.
Yeah.
So there's a subsequent.
So yeah, that one doesn't actually show the thing falling out of the sky,
yeah.
like the light and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that video's out there. We can put in the show notes.
Yeah, and there's a subsequent clip actually where the responding officer is talking to the people in their front yard who witnessed the creature in their backyard, and it's really hilarious. He's like, "Yeah, if it comes back, don't call us. Just deal with it yourself. I don't want to deal with this."
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right under this tweet right here. I mean, if we want to pull it, it's 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But
pretty solid.
They're claiming 8 to 9 foot tall green beings that were in their backyard.
Yeah.
Sounds crazy,
No,
but you never know.
It's different.
Your fine neighbors over here. But again, I would normally discount it as probably not real.
Right here?
Yes. I would normally discount it as nothing. However, seeing as one of my partners said they saw it too, only reason I'm actually investigating it further. So if you guys see anything, especially in your backyard, please call 911. We'll come over, okay?
Was
this the same one?
Different clip, but it's not the one. Anyways,
whatever.
Someone need to pull that all together in one video, like 5 minminutes long.
Not little.
Yeah.
It is interesting too that it's not little green men, it's giant green men.
Yeah.
Right.
That's normally it's the grays, and they're like these little small 3-foot guys with big heads. Like that's always how it's described. But
there are different races of aliens that have been depicted throughout the conspiracy lore, right? Like they're the big tall ones.
Then there's the shape-shifting
ones.
Lizard men, right?
Well, there's that too, but yeah. I mean, and even going further down that rabbit hole, it's really interesting because there are reports of anecdotes of some of these alien sightings happening over and around nuclear sites, right? And even, a craft will appear and then a nuke will be disarmed in some way. And I don't have the source. Maybe we can dig it up.
You gotta check it out. Maelstrom Air Force Base UFO sighting.
Wasn't that just a Russian balloon?
This was like the 70s, I want to say.
Yeah, so a while ago.
It was some time ago, but it's an interesting one because it was seen by a lot of military professionals at the actual location.
Right. And so if we want to put our tinfoil hats on here for a second, just keep this at arm's length. But this is a theory I'm working on. Okay. we are as close as we've ever been as a species since, like, World War II or the Cold War or something, to a nuclear event. Is it a coincidence that extraterrestrial craft or UFOs or UAPs, whatever they're called, have been seen around nuclear sites, disarming nukes, and now we're having this, increased narrative around disclosure and concurrently with the nuclear environment that we're currently in, right? Is there something going on there? Is this disclosure sort of a, some sort of, preparation of the public for potentially increased sightings because we are so close to maybe wiping ourselves off the map that other things are intervening or preparing to intervene on our behalf?
Adding on to that, like, there goes into kind of the very sci-fi oriented theories, and a lot of like TV shows and video games have kind of been built around this idea of maybe there's like this alien civilization or intergalactic body or something that is like guiding the evolution of different species on different planets towards kind of a point so that they can be uplifted into the intergalactic system. Like there's a lot of video games and that are kind of built around that idea, and now they're kind of just guiding us so that we don't kill ourselves at the end of it.
You're so close.
Right.
You're so close.
Yeah, it's like it's trying to avoid the problems of the Fermi paradox.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
Fermi paradox is like when we look out and we look for aliens, we have these radio broadcast signals that go out, and we're kind of waiting for them to come back, right? We're looking, we got the antenna, we had the reception hardware to be able to receive their television, right? As they broadcast it, assuming that they would use a similar technology, but it makes sense, right? There's like a scale up of technology that usually looks, that when we look at it post hoc, we think about it in terms of like, well, this has to be the way it worked, right? So when we look out, we don't see anything. We don't get any of those radio waves. We just get like the noise of the cosmos. So the Fermi paradox is just is an explanation. It's a theoretical explanation of that, of when we look out there and we see, why don't we see anything? Why don't we hear anything when we're listening? Well, what are the filters of civilization that would prevent a civilization from happening? One of them is like asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, blah, 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 things that we can witness from our own history. But at one point it gets to the point of, do you have the resources to create advanced life on your planet? Right, like if you have a planet that's just devoid of steel, or iron, could you build something? That's difficult. We don't really have a model for that, so that could be a filter. And then another one being like, if you're going to get to a type 1 civilization, right? I mean, like you can span between the planets in your own solar system. You need rocket fuel and all these other things. We have a relatively wealthy planet, but we don't know how wealthy other planets are, so there's a lot of unknowns there. And then one of those filters is things like, do you destroy yourselves? In the case of like you get nuclear weapons, do you start shooting them off at each other, or do you resist that temptation? Mm-hmm. So, and that's just one of the many filters of the Fermi paradox.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because mathematically, if you just do the math of how many planets there are, how many solar systems there are, how old the universe is, it should be noisy out there, but it isn't. So why?
Unless we're the first ones that are, like I think there's a few arguments as like we could be the first ones to be kind of ascending, but
that doesn't play out in the math is the trick because of the age of the universe.
But it is statistics, statistically it's highly unlikely that we would be like the first ones to be rising to the top, but we could be the first ones rising to the top, right?
Or we could be so far behind that the technology that they're broadcasting is just something we can't receive. And it's not like, if you're an advanced civilization, are you going to think like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go back and like send the equivalent of smoke signals out into the cosmos, trying to reach these like little peons of human civilization?
I do find it funny that these entities that have managed to get faster than light travel seem to keep crashing into our
that's what I was into another one with the nuke thing. A nuclear weapon to something that can span the spaces of space, like the distance between solar systems, would be child's play.
Right.
So why would they be so interested in nuclear fission?
Well, in preventing us.
Well, I think it's more. It's not that they're interested in nuclear fission. I think they're interested in us with nuclear fission.
Yeah. Right. They're trying to prevent us from destroying ourselves.
Well, it's the same way of
like a savior desire, like it's like a pattern of savior desire.
Could be, yeah. But it's the same thing of like, we're very interested in apes that have started to use stone, Like
Right.
like a lot of variations of primates have like basically entered the Stone Age, and they're conceptualizing the usefulness of using rocks to hit things to be able to like, you know, break open stuff and things like that. Like those are Stone Age patterns that we've been through before, and we get very interested in watching that. Right. And this, you know, it'd be the same thing of like, if we're going out to other galaxies and we're finding life on planets, we'd be very invested in watching and studying them and how they evolve, right? Like,
True. True.
Like,
I would be.
yeah, I'm just thinking like that goes into the theory of like we're a lab experiment almost. Like we're just, the Earth is a big lab as a observation deck, right?
Or we're just all farm animals designed to mine gold and you know, usher it back.
And then
to
they
the master race.
harvest us, and then they take all the resources.
But once again, like mining would become really easy if you can crack a planet.
Yeah.
Right? Like
if you can travel, I mean, you can go to an asteroid and just
Right.
pull all the gold off an asteroid.
Right.
You know, you don't need to like create.
If you have interstellar travel, like a lot of those problems become like, are they like I was like a sci-fi story about like aliens who come here for our resources. I'm like, that seems like a motivation that someone who's resource deficient has.
Yeah.
But if you have artificial intelligence and the ability for interstellar travel, why do you care about resources? Like you just build a robot that goes and mines a planet for you.
Well, there's also just usefulness and population expansion. Like it could be looking at us like we do animals, like animal husbandry. Like we're just human husbandry for the other
just their
species, right?
pets.
we're the beasts of burden in this scenario, right? It could be
That's
that.
fair. That's fair. I mean, I'm still thinking about what you said. Like there are these crafts that can travel at the speed of light, but they're crashing into our planet, and that just like has Project Bluebeam just bouncing around in my head, you know.
Another
We've referenced it just a little bit. On the show.
another
Remind me of
element.
Project Bluebeam. I'm forgetting that.
So Bluebeam is a theory put forth by this guy Sergei Monast, and basically it's the idea that the government, kind of led by NASA and the UN, would use lasers and holograms to create fake alien craft to convince the people that, you know, these extraterrestrials had come to the planet in order to sort of galvanize the public, or basically strike fear into us to cause us to succumb to a global totalitarian government. And not just that, it goes a step further. They'd use these lasers and holograms to create images and of like all of the prophets basically of the major global religions, to give people these like religious experiences to make them feel like the rapture was coming. And also use other technologies to like, and this goes deep. This is like really deep.
I was like, can you do that with lasers?
I mean,
Evan, tell us.
Well, maybe in advanced technology, maybe.
Yeah.
But this Las Vegas thing kind of feels like it could be something in that realm. Like if you're just going to open up your mind to it, of like, okay, these like 2 8-foot tall men crashed into this backyard. There's no marks or anything like that, and then they just disappeared. Like, it's like a very weird, unless it's interdimensional or something like that too, right?
There was a report of a black SUV circling the area where the crash happened. So it could have just been they swooped in and, you know, shepherded it away.
Men in Black come in,
do the mind wipe everybody, and never happened.
Well, yeah, well, and this goes into some of the like other CIA operations. Like we're going full deep dive here, right here. Is like some of it kind of reminds me of what you were saying. Kind of reminds me of Operation Stargate, which is something that's been declassified. The movie Men Who Stare at Goats was a comedic take on this operation, but the whole idea was basically going into people's minds and seeing if you can use like people's minds for like psychic powers, kind of a thing, to be able to like astral project and to like possibly conduct assassinations and things like that. Well, like it was declassified that the CIA was working on Operation Stargate and using it as like a study, but what the results of that study were, we have no idea, right?
Interesting.
But it does kind of make me like the astral projection thought process is like, maybe that's the means of traveling faster than light, is it's more like an astral projection type of thing, right?
Very interesting. Yeah, the furthest out part of the Project Bluebeam conspiracy is that they would have technology to actually be able to affect people's internal dialogue and inject into them like the voice of God, effectively making them think that like their deity was like communicating directly with them to cause them to do things that they wanted them to do.
If consciousness seems to be this like electromagnetic waves, and it's like, you know, that type of thing, maybe there's some way of tapping into that, or, you know, all this is kind of who knows, right?
What episode was it that we were talking about, reading your brainwaves and telling if you had a crush on your coworker or whatever, like that clip from the WEF.
That was a while ago.
This is it's coming together a little bit for me. But
and some of these reports I've seen before, and I don't know how credible they are. It's like they'll be talking about how they went into this room with a gray. It was like at a place like Area 51 or some offsite place, and there's like the gray that they were helping out was speaking to them telepathically. Like I've seen those types of things before as well, but I don't know how credible those things are.
Right.
But if we're talking about these little gray men, let's say hypothetically they're real, and they have these big brains, maybe that's just how their evolution has gone, where they have they use much more of their brain and they're able to connect into that type of stuff. Like who knows? Like I don't know. I'll keep an open mind though.
So there's a documentary on Amazon, and Joe Rogan just interviewed the maker of it. It's called Moment of Contact, about a Brazil experience where this place in Brazil, Virginia or something like that, there's a alien craft crashes, eyewitness testimony, all these people. Very fascinating, and how it patterns and layers a lot of things you see, but also violates some of those. But one of the things that they claim, and they have this guy who is like a radiologist who's supposed to take the x-rays of this black bag of what looks like a small child, but he can't open it. These government agents are like standing over him. They won't let him do it, but he's supposed to do his job. And he hears in his head these voices as he's doing it. Like, and just matter, this is just some dude, and you have this experience, and then the government agents leave, and you're just supposed to just like,
and like, how are you supposed to explain that to people?
Yeah,
right.
Like
right. This thing happened to me.
Right.
And also you're probably like, this is classified information. You got these guys in black SUVs coming to your city in Brazil and all this stuff. And like, what are you supposed to do about that?
Yeah. It's a fascinating documentary. It's worth watching.
Cool. Check it out. Should we pivot to non-tinfoil hat
let's
conversation?
Take the hats off. We're back to regular conspiracy.
I think everything on our docket is kind of tinfoil hat, right?
Well,
it's just that sort of week.
Or was.
Sometimes you have tinfoil hat weeks.
Dude,
true. We gotta lean into it.
Here we are. Well, second on the list is this Biden bribery case. David, do you want to explain the context here? What's going on?
So what's interesting here is this is something that's been mentioned for some time, that both that the Bidens withheld funds in an illegal way in order to get this prosecutor fired because he was looking into a company that he's involved with, Burisma, and this has been percolating for 5 years or something like that.
Long time.
One of the things that happened this week is the House Oversight Committee chairman, James Comer, said Monday that the FBI informant report is accusing the Biden administration of $5 million of bribery scheme that took place while he was vice president, which is pretty substantial, right? If there's material evidence of that. This involves shell companies, which is interesting because, Burisma is not a shell company, but it's like if there's related shell companies that are getting contracts, not to mention the Hunter Biden situation. And the FBI official told him that it's part of an active investigation. So you could have a situation where the FBI is investigating the current president while also the DOJ is indicting the last president. We live in a weird moment,
dude.
I mean, and the Representative Comer from Kentucky, he says that the person who's bringing this forward is highly credible informant, and that's once again This is interesting, right? Because he's not releasing the name of the informant, much like Seymour Hersh did not release the names of his informants working with him. But this guy's a freaking congressman, right?
Yeah.
So if you say like, what is your standard of evidence for belief? Then maybe that's the theme of today's video. A part of it has to be credibility, right? And what is credibility? How do you negotiate what is considered credible? Right? To me, credibility is this doesn't actually fit their books. It doesn't actually have a lot of incentives for them to do. The existing FBI, I mean, like, for example, if you listen to like Tim Cass and some of the other podcasts, I love those guys. They're great. But one of the things that their mental model they just start out with is that all the government agencies work for the Democrats, right? Maybe it's more complicated than that, right? So like there's a counterfactual happening that might make them lean into this, but there's also the counterfactual that you might want to consider leaning out.
Well, the first question on my mind actually was Comer is a Republican, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So what is there a partisan component to this where he as a Republican are bringing these allegations against a Democratic president?
Right. I mean, but if there's no there, he has a tremendous reputational loss.
There's downside risk
theory.
for him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if he says this informant exists, but then it comes to a head and there's no material evidence, then he just looks like a goofball.
Yeah.
Right.
But perhaps not within his own party, maybe.
Yeah, and there is a weird part of that with the media cycle, right, where a lot of these things happen very slowly, I mean, and we're slow because we do a weekly show, right? Hopefully we can get some development, but over a longer period of time, there's not a lot of incentive to look back and actually confirm that. Now, we do have examples of that where it did happen and it had tremendous consequence. The Durham report's a good example, where the Russiagate scandal pretty much had a final investigation. It came out and had its own news cycle that the entire thing was BS and that it was effectively a scam.
Well, it did, but was that as far-reaching as the just complete media barrage for the last 6 years or whatever over all of this stuff? Like, I don't think so. It's much to me like the New York Times coming back after publishing something that's wrong, letting that go through the news cycle, and then issuing a little update retraction at the bottom of the article after it's already left the news cycle to correct some glaring error that basically undermines the credibility of their entire article. Right? It's like, how much impact is it really?
Yeah, it's like you indoctrinate a population into a certain belief, and over years of time, and then you come back with like a very we'll talk about this for a week kind of a thing, right?
It's like, oh, by the way, we messed this up, but look at this thing over here, aliens.
Yeah.
But it's a tremendous opportunity for the people who are trying to build the movement of people who are skeptical of government intervention and the state, right? Because it gives you an opportunity to say, hey, everything you've learned is false. And that forbidden knowledge, or knowledge you didn't know you needed, is a tremendously intoxicating thing. That's why conspiracy theories are so tempting, right? That's why it's easy to overextend in them, is because you get the feeling like you're on the inside of something important and secret and different from the world that's around you. It has magic to it in that sense. So it's a funny thing, right? Because we have tremendous evidence of the government lying to us, right? We have tremendous evidence of, presidents who are corrupt, right? Who are taking, I don't think that's someone with power abusing that power for their own personal gain. I can't imagine.
Unheard of.
But we shouldn't also and we should be extra careful when it fits our books, right? When you're a Republican, it's against a Democrat, or a Democrat and it's a Republican.
Right.
So the mental model that I am always trying to develop and encourage is one of, holding close to things that work both deductively from your first principles, and then holding further away things that require extraordinary evidence. And then like in between, you're negotiating between those things, right? So UFOs exist somewhere in that space to me of holding away, but not being the kind of person who's like, it must be a psyop, or it must be all false, or it must be all true.
Right.
Right. You have to kind of negotiate between those things.
Well, and likely in all of these types of situations, it's always somewhere in between all of that. Like that tends to be, because you're going to end up having like on the alien stuff. Now you're gonna end up having these people going with these like wild theories that start to get percolated across the internet, right? And really, it's probably less so than that, or a lot of like the Epstein stuff. Like there starts to become very vast. Large scale conspiracy ideas that come out of that, but really it's somewhere probably a little bit more toned down than that. Although the Epstein stuff looks pretty damning in a lot of ways, but there's always going to be, these things are going to exist on a spectrum in some way, right?
There's a huge difference between saying all the elites are reptiles and all the elites are pedos,
or all the elites are reptiles, or just Hillary Clinton's a reptile,
right. or getting further down that some are. Or that some participate in a particular culture that is, that emphasizes sex with underage kids. That's a terrifying idea in itself. And the problem is that the more restrained vision gets combined with the more expansive vision in the popular imagination, and then therefore the more restrained vision looks crazy. Yeah. While you're trying to just say like, look, I'm responding to the evidence here. And that's also what the people who believe that everyone's a reptile, right? are saying. So that's that difference. How do you distinguish yourself between those two? Relies on an intelligence of the audience to like engage maturely with the fact that, one, I'm not trying to lie to you. I'm really just trying to respond to things as I see them. And then two, requiring of them to be like, we have a temptation to say, this is what's true. And like, that's our media source, right? Where it's like, it might be true, like we don't know. Right? There's a tremendous amount of unknown here, because what we're talking about very specifically in this case and on all the cases that we're covering today, that there are a lot of people between us and the actual phenomena, and a lot of those people are very specifically secret agencies designed to be withheld information from the public.
Right. And to, in some cases, dispel disseminate false information.
Well, another element too is just the use of the word conspiracy theory as a way of like weaponizing against people that are being skeptical about things. Like you also got to be cognizant of that. Like the word conspiracy theory didn't enter public lexicon until 1964, like after the JFK stuff, because so many people were percolating all these ideas about JFK and what happened. Now 50 years later, we're starting to get a bunch of stuff. It's like, oh, the CIA was involved in this stuff. But the word itself was not a term that was used in public parlance until the 1960s. And it seemed to be a way of like just weaponizing against people that are going against orthodox opinions. It's just like, don't listen to them, conspiracy theory, right? But there is like in the object of finding truth, like there are elements of you have to be skeptical of things and you have to be able to entertain thoughts that might be outside of the public lexicon. So,
yeah. I know we're up against a bit of a time crunch here today, so I want to make sure we get time to dig into this SEC thing, because I do think that's some really interesting emergent
before that, if we have the time, there's also the Trump indictment.
We did gloss over it slightly. Is there more there we want to kind of dig in on?
At minimum, it has to be mentioned that this is an accusation that Trump held on to top secret material after after no longer being president, and in prosecuting him under the 1917 Espionage Act. We don't have the time to get into it right now, but definitely check out Glenn Greenwald's breakdown of the 1917 Espionage Act. That is the common cause of a tremendous amount of problems with the U.S. security state. That is the initial, then the Church Commission as a reform of that, and then in the response to 9/11, expanding it again, right? So we have this interesting bell curve of that, where the more latitude you give a secret organization who can raise its own funds and do all this shady stuff, they may abuse it. And, if you're more skeptical, they probably will. And that's what we're kind of seeing, is that this is, mishandling and classified documents. But now Biden had a bunch of classified documents in his garage.
And other places. Yeah, right. Many other places.
There's, the internet overfloweth with Banana Republic memes, right? Of a sitting president prosecuting someone who's running against him, who's a former president. I mean, it's a watershed moment potentially for the current moment. Like, we look at how chaotic the news cycle is right now. It's what is our country coming to sort of moment for a lot of people. Yeah. When, whatever you think about Trump, he is he's a former president and running for president now. To have the DOJ come after him on something that is so hypocritical of the Biden administration is concerning for a lot of folks, I think.
Well, it is, and I think that you raise a very important point there that bears repeating, and that is that no matter what you think of Trump, you need to think about the larger systemic ramifications of what this all means, right? And maybe put aside some of the emotional reactions you have to the person that Trump is, and understand that this could be tremendously detrimental to the function of our government, the health, the possibility that we have of getting back to an actual constitutional republic ever in this country.
Well, I think it raises a question. It's like everybody wants their third rail candidate to come in. Like you might be an RFK Jr. person, a Ron Paul person, a Vivek Ramaswamy person, a Trump person. And I think a lot of the Trump moment and the Trump presidency showcases what happens when you're the outsider that tries to come in and tries to disrupt this big, gigantic blob, as we often like to call it. And how much hell they will raise for you when you do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it does illustrate kind of how either angry or afraid they are of Trump. That just the litany, the chronology of all of the things that they've thrown against him. It is in and of itself its own phenomenon. It's really interesting to have observed.
And especially because it's not working, yet they keep doing it, right? So like the last indictment made him more popular.
Well, and I think it's an example of the new age, the digital age that we're in, right? Like we're watching the breakdown of the media. Like it's very much like the Gutenberg press. You can't control the noble lies anymore. And certain people are navigating through it very well. And Trump's one of those people.
We got Cuomo saying this will make Trump more popular, right?
Do you want me to play the clip?
Matt Taibbi saying that. I mean,
real quick, sure.
Yeah, real quick.
All right, here. So
these concerns, everybody loves conspiracies these days. I'm not so sure that these investigations aren't done in a way that winds up intentionally or unintentionally helping the former president, to be honest, because every time there's a swing, it seems to expose the fact that they go after him with what seems to be at or below a level of anything that would be impressive to people reviewing the documents. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I'm obviously not a fan of Donald Trump. I wrote a book about the guy called Insane Clown President. But, my feeling is if you're going to take the very extreme step of indicting somebody who's the likely nominee of the opposition party, the charge has to meet two tests. It has to be extremely serious and it has to be an airtight case. And I think both of these cases fail on both of those points.
Yeah, a buddy of mine who's a very smart guy and a lawyer, but, just a kind of consumer of all things relevant like yourself. He was like, hey, I don't care that it's during the election. The fact that you're running shouldn't shield you. Maybe he's running because he knows it's his best defense on these things. Maybe, but I think that to the majority, the optics are terrible. If you're swinging at somebody during an election and you don't have what we deem the goods. Now, what does that look like in this case? Do you think it comes down to, well, what are the documents he was keeping?
I'll close it there, but.
Yeah, and that's a really great framework, right? Because they had 4 years to do this. 3 years, really. And yet they potentially waited for the election. Is that for the election effects of it? And if the election effects blow back and they actually get worse, there's a certain amount of people who kind of want Trump to be the nominee because they think he's the most likely to lose against Biden. So there are all kinds
Which
of ways
seemed to be
think
the
about this
case
from
in
a
the 2016 election with the Hillary Clinton emails, as they were trying to prop up him so that he would be an easy victory for Hillary, right?
Mm-hmm. More so the media than the intelligence state, but or the DOJ. But this could be the incentive.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So the SEC.
Okay. So on the SEC in my world right now, for those that don't know, I might get technical at sometimes when I'm breaking this down, so feel free to stop me. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, they have sued both Coinbase and Binance. Binance is the largest crypto exchange in the world. Coinbase is probably the largest one in America right now, and they've sued them for selling unregistered securities. But one of the big problems that's happening right now in the crypto space is that there's an extreme lack of regulatory clarity in America right now, and nobody really understands what's a security, what's a commodity. And anytime any of these entities try to go to Gary Gensler and the SEC and trying to be like, hey, what are we doing right here? They basically just get radio silence from the SEC. So what's happening right now is that this is a very clear example of just regulation through enforcement rather than like actually putting things into law and saying what these entities can and can't do. Right now, it's just like, Coinbase went public like a year or two ago, and they had all these conversations with the SEC. Is like, this is what we're doing. Just like, let us know if anything's wrong with what we're selling here. Like, what's under your purview? What can and can't we do? And the SEC is just like, yeah, it's fine. You go for it. And now here, without any warning, they just kind of come in and they're just like, oh yeah, you're selling 13 unregistered securities. We're suing you right now, right? So that's essentially what's happening right now.
So it seems very arbitrary.
Very arbitrary.
Is there timing to this?
I don't know if there's timing to this necessarily. Maybe there's something like that. Gary Gensler is a very complicated man in this regard because he used to teach classes on blockchain, like for colleges, before he was the SEC chair, and he seemed to kind of understand the industry. But now as SEC chair, it's just like, we don't need these renegade currencies going around. We have the dollar, we have the yuan.
That's an actual quote. He's literally on television
on CNBC saying
we don't
this.
need digital currencies from private actors. We have the U.S. dollar.
Yeah, it's just like everything now is already digital. So why do we need these other digital things? Like that's essentially the point that he's making. Right?
And imagine that for a moment, that the government is telling you, why do you need that? After all, we provide that, right? That is a mafia-like approach to governance, right? That's saying that the government isn't there to say, hey, here's something I could use to protect people, so I'm going to let you know about what you can and can't do in order to protect people. What they're saying is, I'm not going to tell you what you can and can't do. I'm just going to come after you when I feel like it. And then I'm going to force everyone into the same way of doing their finances, and it has to be within the system that I pre-approve, the traditional system, the system that a lot of these people have made their fortunes on in the first place.
Right.
Well, and what defines something as a security is an old law called the Howey test that's back from the 1930s. So we're talking about new technology that's come in the last 10 years right now, and we're using a 1930s law to determine what is and what isn't a security right now. And it's just like we're living in a different ecosystem right now. So like that's why we have such a lack of regulatory clarity. So when this is what Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, is saying, is just like, with us not knowing how to operate, you're just sending all this new industry, all this new innovation overseas right now. Like I'm hearing from people in the crypto space is like, I would rather live in Asia right now, somewhere in Asia, than operate in the United States, because I don't know if what I'm doing is illegal or not. Like they're not confirming with me. I don't know. And so it's like, yeah, the land of the free was like, well, it's very difficult to operate a business right now for a lot of people in the tech space, because we don't know how free we are to operate that business. So yeah, that's kind of the big thing right now.
So why does that matter? If you're not a crypto person, why does it matter? That's the question. Because as soon as we said cryptocurrency, a bunch of people went, oh, yeah, and they don't.
Especially right now in the midst of the bear market, where it's like nobody cares anymore.
Yeah.
I think what it matters right now is like, especially if you have this like American exceptionalism attitude, is just like, are we going to be on the forefront of new technologies, or are we going to let other countries be on the forefront of these new technologies? It's like the crypto ecosystem, crypto, AI, all this stuff, I think AI is kind of in a similar boat. There's going to be these types of problems that occur because government overreach is going to try to clamp down on certain things. Like, do we want to be on the forefront of the new technology that's kind of going to kind of like usher in the new innovation that's going to continue to push us forward, or are we going to let everybody else get on board? Because tons of the other nations that are, first world countries, they have regulatory clarity right now, and they're able to operate. They know what the rules of the game are right now. Right now in America, we don't know what the rules are. We're kind of just all guessing.
Yeah, but right? let me be the liberal real quick. But some people bought a currency and then value went down, and now they don't have as much money as they once had.
Some people bought the value of something and the value went up and they have more money right now. Like,
have you ever bought a stock before or invested in a business? Yeah, Sometimes
have you ever put your money in a bank? Sometimes the money goes away.
There is risk in the world. Yes.
There is
but
risk.
The government exists to remove all the risk,
of
right?
course.
Isn't that the purpose of government? Is to
they just displace the risk
to
the taxpayer.
And here's the thing is, like, most people know about the FTX story. Sam Bankman-Fried, FTX collapsed. The SEC didn't catch that. In fact, the SEC was having a bunch of backroom meetings that might be coming out. I know Representative Emmer, the House Majority Whip, is kind of looking into certain things that were happening in the background there. But like the SEC did not find anything with FTX. Like, FTX went under. They were in conversations. They were the ones that were doing all the lobbying for the regulations. They were the good boys, even though they were operating out in the Bahamas, right? Like,
well, and it's important to remember the scale. They failed by billions and billions of dollars.
$10 billion.
Yeah, and failed without doing any of the basics of accounting that even a small business would do, right? And the SEC didn't catch that. Yeah, right. The SEC didn't catch that, but now they're coming after Coinbase, who's actually trying to do the job right and isn't failing and isn't a activist organization masquerading as a cryptocurrency business. And they're the ones who are actually getting sued by the SEC.
Well, and there's also an element too of like, you actually have two organizations at play here, because Bitcoin is pretty widely determined. It's a commodity because of its history, and there's a whole reason for that. Ethereum's kind of getting into that wheelhouse, but there's a lot of these other crypto companies where they are kind of operating under centralized institutions and things like that. So like, there is, like, is it a security or not is a question. But so you have kind of in these exchanges like Coinbase, they're operating under two major purviews. It's the CFTC, which looks after commodities, and then it's the SEC, which looks after securities. But the rules that the CFTC and the SEC have don't comply with each other. So you almost have like this turf war of who has the jurisdiction over these organizations right now. Right. And there's no clarity between the two.
Right. And then you have Coinbase, who's both registered as a brokerage so they can do securities, and they have commodities like licensing and stuff like that. They don't use the brokerage, right? Because traditionally it's all been considered commodity. And so they go to the SEC and they say, hey, we have this old licensure. We can just bring this back and we can do it under that. No problem. Hey, we'll comply. We'll do it through that mechanism.
Like,
and they're like,
allow us to comply. Like that's what Brian Armstrong, he goes to DC and he's just like, please let me have a meeting with Gary Gensler. I've never met him face to face yet. Like,
this is the largest exchange in the world, right? I mean,
Coinbase is in America. Binance is the world.
Oh, okay. So it's just, it's so crazy. And another reason why this should matter to everyday people is like, what kind of country do you want to live in? American exceptionalism, but also what kind of state do you want to have? Do you want to have a mafia-like state that comes in and just persecutes you because you're not greasing the skids well? You're not Sam Bankman-Fried. You're just some company trying to sell something that people want. I mean, which sort of world do you want to live in? One where the state has to tell you ahead of time, maybe even assess the economic damages of the regulations, like the REINS Act? Or do you want one where they can just arbitrarily come in and fleece you? Because that's what we're experiencing right now with this story.
It's very interesting because I certainly don't think of Brian Armstrong as an outsider. I mean, as the first crypto exchange to go public in, a very major way like they did, I mean, he's familiar. It's interesting to me to hear that he's never met Gary Gensler. That is odd. I don't understand.
Brian Armstrong, I think, is one of
part.
the great heroes in the crypto space right now. Over the last couple years, he's been one of those people to me. A lot of people always had, because in the crypto space, there's kind of this like centralized institutions versus decentralized, like trustless organizations. And so there's always a skepticism towards these centralized exchanges like FTX, like Coinbase, like Binance, right? So like there kind of ends up being that, but like Brian has been a very good representative of the crypto industry as a whole and really educating like our legislators about things. Like he's over the last 2 years, I've become more and more impressed with him. He's a fellow bald like you, Dave.
Speaking of which, Gary Gensler is a perfect name.
He's a bad. He's a bad bald. He's a bad bald.
Super villain, right? It's like Peter Parker, Gary Gensler.
He's got good villain vibes.
He's got some serious Gary Gensler. It's like, oof.
There's a lot of weight to that name. But yeah, no. Brian is also. I know on the Coinbase Foundation side, they're doing a lot of stuff now. 501c3, I believe, of giving basically the industry more direct access of understanding how all the different congressmen and senators are on crypto. Like they're doing a very grassroots, like here's a way to get in touch with your senator. Here's like a scorecard of how they are on these issues. They're kind of putting all that stuff together, which goes to something I've said before, where I think the crypto world, the crypto lobby is going to be a much more central force in our politics going forward. I think we're going to see a lot more of it happen in the 2024 campaign. We had Vivek Ramaswamy and RFK Jr., they spoke at the Bitcoin conference and said how important this is, relating it to things like the Canadian trucker movement of when all these people's banks got shut down, they were still able to use Bitcoin. I think that there's certain turf wars that are happening. There's monetary wars that are happening right now. So.
Right, and like to land that fully, man, think about a moment. How much do we talk about how the Federal Reserve is a terrible institution that's causing a lot of the financial chaos right now? How much do we talk about how people's savings are being evaporated in front of them? Now, I'm not suggesting you put all your savings into crypto. Not everybody's Kyle. But when you think about it, like the government wants a monopoly and they don't like competition. So if what their whole goal here is to say, why do we need any digital assets? We had the US dollar. It's to force you into their control. And if you break it down that far, what you're looking at is once again, mafia-like situation where what they want is to control you via the money. And we got RFK Jr., a Democrat, saying that that's a problem. So this is, I think, totally out of touch. Everyday people have a great opportunity here to say, I'm not into crypto, but I don't want the government to tell me what I can and can't buy freely with my own money. That's what we mean when we say economic freedom. It's the economic right to do with your own money what fits your values and allows you to solve problems in your world.
Absolutely.
And like, I guess to pin a bow on that one, under Obama, there was a thing called Operation Choke Point, which was a way of squeezing firearms companies and tobacco dispensaries out of their banking. Is just good way to crack down on people is like, if you can't do business and have a bank account, it's very difficult to do business, right? And this is starting to happen in the crypto industry. It's pretty much widely understood that if you're a publicly facing crypto friendly bank, is like you are a target right now. And there's already a lot of the on-ramps for people, like Visa will cut you out and block your payment if you're trying to like buy off MoonPay directly with Visa or MasterCard. They will often just like block your transaction for if you're just trying to buy some Ethereum quickly. That type of stuff. Like these types of things are happening right now, and like be wary. Like the banking, and I think the Canadian trucker example is like the perfect indicator of like there's this thing. It kind of went against the establishment, went against the institutions. They locked people out of their bank accounts. They targeted individual civilians, and that type of stuff is happening right here in America as well. So like be very wary of that. Just understand that this is one of the control mechanisms for people, and crypto, in my mind, is one of the ways to try to get around that, but they are trying to close off the exits for a lot of people to keep you trapped in the monetary system. Because like what keeps the US dollar going? It's just blind faith that it's going to keep going. Like that, at the end of the day, that's what it is. And that's what most monetary, wars are kind of based around. It's just like, it's a battle of faith. So,
as are a lot of things, including aliens and a lot of the other stuff we talked about today.
It's a great podcast.
You
that
like
was
that?
quick.
Yeah.
Wrapping it up.
Yeah.
Wild. We got very conspiratorial.
Yeah.
We did. We went deep, but you got to do it sometimes. When the news is out there, we just talk about it, right?
Trying to cover the important stuff. And I can't tell you how many times we've had aliens on the docket, even crypto on the docket, and we just bumped it down because there was like more important stuff. We didn't talk about the dam in Russia. We didn't talk about a whole bunch of other stuff just because it was a crazy week.
It was a crazy week.
And we need to make sure we cover everything, and we've done a lot of foreign policy. So
yep. Yeah. Well, next time I'm sure there will be more news out of Ukraine and Russia for us to talk about next week.
There'll be a new drone that hits the Kremlin.
Yeah, the spring offensive is kind of starting up, is what they say, but it's going out very well. A lot of reports are suggesting them. There's a lot going on in that front that we need to cover.
And we will do so next time. For now, we really appreciate you watching. For David Rand, Kyle Mack, and Evan Koch back there on the buttons, we appreciate you. See you next time.
See ya.